Hi everybody, welcome to my simple channel. On this occasion, I will share information about ships, from the history of their use to the development of today's ships. Without further ado, let's watch the video.
There are several types of ships or boats that exist in the world. The first is a human-powered boat. A human-powered boat is a boat propelled by human power. The three main ways of gathering human power are directly from the hands or feet, through the hands with paddles or poles, or through the feet with cranks or pedals. While most human-powered boats use buoyancy to maintain their position relative to the surface of the water, some, such as human-powered hydrofoils and human-powered submarines, use hydrofoils either alone or in addition to buoyancy. Next is the rowing boat. A rowing ship is a ship that still utilizes human power as its propulsion. This ship is still often found in shallow waters or river tourist attractions. Usually, there is a ship controller as a rower who looks after the passengers. Next is the sailing ship. Sailing ships are ships that are propelled by using sails that utilize wind power as their propulsion. The construction of this ship was generally made of wood and was used for a long time as the backbone of shipping, both civil and military, until the invention of the steam engine and iron or steel ships in the 19th century, along with the hectic industrial revolution pioneered by the British through the invention of the steam engine by James Watt. At first, sailing ships were driven by human power, such as rowers and sails. Models of this type of ship can be seen on Viking ships, ancient Egyptian ships, ancient Roman ships, and ancient Indian ships until the time of the Borobudur ship, which used sailing ships. Along with developments, outrigger sailing ships were used as found in Indonesia, ships using triangular sails as found in the Middle East, and rectangular sailing ships used by Europeans before entering the century of exploration, as well as folding sailing ships with the models found in Japan or China. At the present time, generally sailing ships are equipped with outboard engines to deal with the possibility of the wind not blowing in certain areas so that they can continue their journey. Next up is the steamer. A steamer, also known as a fireboat, is a ship driven by steam power that drives propellers or paddle wheels. A transoceanic steamship is known as a steamship. After the manufacture of sailing ships developed and the need for faster sailing began to be felt, while sailing ships had various limitations, steamships then became the prima donna of the new transportation. Steamships began to be used after the discovery of the steam engine in England by James Watt, which gave rise to the Industrial Revolution, which was also a fuel revolution because at that time coal began to be used on a wider scale to replace firewood. On a sailing scale, the steamship was discovered by John Fitch in 1787 by sailing the Delaware River, United States, and then by Robert Fulton in 1802. Initially, due to the lack of trust between shipbuilders and crew, steamships still used tall masts and were equipped with spare sails to anticipate when the fuel in the steam furnace runs out. Such ship models can be found on pre-dreadnought warships built before 1906. For example, warships of the Asahi, Japan, or Borodino, Russia, types were involved in sea warfare in Tsushima Bay during the Japan-Russia War in 1902. Then there are diesel boats. Diesel boats are propelled by diesel engines. The diesel engine used is generally a 4-stroke, but it does not rule out the possibility of a 2-stroke diesel engine. This ship is also known as a motor ship. Next is the submarine. Nuclear-powered submarines are submarines that use a pressurized water reactor as a source of power to rotate the main turbine that drives the propellers and electric motors that charge the battery to produce electricity for various purposes. Unlike diesel submarines, which must surface to suck the air needed by diesel engines, the advantage of nuclear submarines is their operational life and that they are more powerful. Even though the submarine has a large size and must be in a submerged condition, uranium as fuel from the reactor can be replaced after 3 years of use. The inhibiting factor for the operational period is only the crew supply requirement. Type of ship based on the type of shipping. The first are surface ships. Surface ships are ships that sail on the surface of the sea. Ships that are generally found, including warships, passenger ships, and aircraft carriers, are classified as surface ships. A submarine is a ship that moves under the surface of the water and is generally used for military purposes and interests. Most of the Navy owns and operates submarines, even though the number and population of each country are different. Apart from being used for military purposes, submarines are also used for marine and freshwater science and for serving at depths unsuitable for human divers. Germany has a submarine that is popularly known as the U-boat, which is a summary of the word Unterseeboot. It began to be assigned in World War I as a lethal weapons system for the opposing navy, especially in World War II. So it is known as the U-class. Apart from Germany, a popular country for using submarines as the main force of the Navy is the Soviet Union or Russia. Although submarines float easily, they are able to dive to the ocean floor and remain in deep water for months. The secret lies in the distinctive construction of the double wall of the ship. Special impermeable spaces, or ballast tanks, between the outer and inner walls can be filled with seawater, increasing the overall weight and reducing buoyancy. By pushing the propeller forward and pointing the flat rudder blades downward, the boat dives. The steel inner walls are able to withstand tremendous pressure at depth. Once in the water, the ship maintains its position with the help of ballast tanks along the keel. To rise to the surface, the submarine expels water from the ballast tanks. Periscopes, radar, sonar, and satellite networks are the main means of navigation for submarines. While floating on the surface, a submarine is said to be positively buoyant. The ballast tanks were barely filled with water. While diving, the ship gains negative buoyancy because the air in the ballast tanks is expelled through the air valve to be replaced by water that enters through the flood holes. To cruise at a constant depth, the submarine uses a technique of balancing with what is called neutral buoyancy. In this technique, pressurized air is pumped into the ballast tanks sufficiently, and the flood holes are left open. To rise to the surface, compressed air carried on board is pumped into the ballast tanks, so the water comes out. The most advanced submarines make their own fresh water from seawater. There is also a reserve of air produced by electrolysis, a process that liberates oxygen from fresh water. When near the surface, the submarine can take in air and release exhaust gases through a closed snorkel that opens above the water's surface. As well as the periscope, radio antenna, and other masts, several snorkels appeared on the superstructure, or conning tower. The air is monitored daily to ensure adequate oxygen levels. Air is also channeled through the filter, which removes any impurities. Exhaust gases exit through a separate pipe. A submarine or a ship can float because the weight of the water it displaces is equal to the weight of the ship itself. This displacement of water creates an upward force called buoyancy force and acts against the force of gravity, which will pull the ship down. Unlike ordinary ships, a submarine can adjust its buoyancy so that it can sink and surface as needed. To regulate its buoyancy, the submarine has ballast tanks and auxiliary or balancing tanks, which can be filled with water or air. When the submarine is on the surface, the ballast tanks are filled with air so that the overall density of the submarine is less than the density of the surrounding water. When the ship dives, the ballast tanks are filled with water, and the air in the ballast tanks is released out of the submarine until the overall density becomes greater than the density of the surrounding water, so that the submarine begins to sink, negative buoyancy. A supply of compressed air is maintained inside the submarine via air tubes as life support. In addition, the submarine has movable devices in the form of short wings called a hydroplane at the stern to help regulate the direction of the dive. The hydroplane will be directed so that the water will move past the stern and push the stern up so that the submarine can point downward. To keep the submarine at a certain level of depth, it maintains a balance between air and water in the balancing tank so that its overall density is equal to the density of the surrounding water, neutral buoyancy. When the submarine reaches its cruising depth, the hydroplanes are aligned so that the submarine can travel straight through the water. Water is also pushed between the bow and stern balance tanks to maintain balance. The type of water around it, positive buoyancy, and a submarine appears. The hydroplane is directed in such a way that the water will move over the stern and push the stern down, causing the submarine to point upward. In an emergency situation, the ballast tanks can be quickly filled with high-pressure air to bring the submarine to the surface very quickly. Submarines can be steered in the water by using the tail rudder to turn right or left and the hydroplane to adjust the direction of the ship's fore and aft. In addition, some submarines are equipped with a retractable backup propulsion motor that allows them to rotate 360 degrees. A warship is a ship used for military or armed forces purposes. Generally divided into aircraft carriers, combatants, patrol boats, transports, submarines, and support vessels used by the Navy, such as tankers and tender ships. In some countries where the seas freeze in certain seasons, such as Russia and Finland, for example, icebreakers are also used. The presence of warships began when many kingdoms or governments needed or felt the need to assert their position in the waters while simultaneously providing security guarantees in the waters to protect their countries and their activities, such as fishing and trade. There are many security disturbances in the waters that must be prevented, including attacks from other countries, which are safer if they are prevented directly from the sea. In addition, there are also those who use their ships to plunder other countries through the waters. The Vikings from Scandinavia explored many seas and other areas with specially designed ships known as Viking longships. During the exploration period, merchant ships were specifically designed to be sailing warships so that they could also carry weapons such as cannons, both for means of defending themselves from pirate attacks or even to control the area they wanted. Many Western nations, such as Spain and Portugal, use galleon-type sailing warships, which are used to explore the oceans, transport merchandise or even loot, as well as fight either against rival trading fleets, pirates, or even local rulers who do not submit to their will. It was in the centuries that began with this exploration, which later continued into the centuries of colonization of other nations and the establishment of new colonies. At the present time, especially for countries that have territorial waters, the need to build a navy and warships is important, which is then adjusted to the capabilities of each country. Like the Air Force, the development of the Navy depends on the development of science and technology, especially in the maritime world. In addition, building a navy required huge costs and resources, not only to build the required number of fleets but also to keep the existing fleets operating properly. Generally, the ability of countries to maintain the continuity of their navy operations also depends on the country's economy. But it can also mean that operating a strong navy can also be considered or seen as an investment to maintain its economy. For this reason, the survival of the Navy, including the Air Force, also depends on political and economic policies, including a country's views on regional political developments, which are currently known as geopolitics. Unlike the Army, where personnel are armed, the Navy and Air Force adhere to a manned weapon philosophy. Management within the Navy and Air Force is different from that of the Army. Other sources state that the cost for 1 month of operation of the Van Spike-class warships is the same as the operational cost of one ground troop battalion for half a year. With the discovery and development of aerospace technology, such as the existence of helicopters and fighter aircraft specifically designed for Navy operations, the range and management of fleet operations can be optimized because aircraft and helicopters can expand the range of surveillance and deterrence with their radar and weaponry capabilities. Technological developments also make it possible for every armed force, including the navy of each country, to operate its fleet according to needs but with striking power that is not inferior to that of countries that have large navies. The navies of many countries operate patrol boats equipped with missiles and torpedoes and warships of the corvette type, which are considered sufficient to guard their territorial waters. Technological developments on warships are inseparable from technological developments in the world of shipping in general. At first, it started with a simple sailing warship equipped with rowers, such as galleys and Viking longships, which had only one single deck and were equipped with archers, flamethrowers, or catapults. The invention of firearms and cannons, as well as the increased cruising range and range of cannon fire, required new types of ships that had large payloads and far-reaching ranges to the ocean, which gave rise to galleon-type ships. The need for strong materials or materials to withstand cannon shots made the ship industry use steel materials as the basic construction and ship hulls, which gave rise to the ironclad warships that developed into the warships we know today. As a driving force, developed from sails and rowers, steam engines that use coal fuel and diesel engines that use oil fuel. The shift from coal to oil fuel actually became the rationale for the emergence of the concept of energy security. This concept arose from the thoughts of Winston Churchill, who later became British Prime Minister, about how to get supplies of fuel oil for the British fleet and maintain it. At that time and even today, fuel oil is a scarce commodity, but it is quite practical to use. Engine and propulsion technology. The discovery of nuclear energy and nuclear reactors made it possible for efforts to turn nuclear energy into fuel for ships, especially in the post-Second World War era, which eventually developed into nuclear-powered ships such as aircraft carriers, cruisers, and submarines. The USS Nautilus is the world's first nuclear submarine. The advantage of nuclear power is that it allows the fleet of ships to sail for a long time. Another development that also colored warships was the discovery of radio, telegraph, radar, sonar, and other means of communication and navigation that enabled warships to carry out detection and communication, including wiretapping, which was increasingly advanced and more precise. In addition, developments in weapons ranging from cannons to rockets, missiles, mines, and torpedoes have made warships have many functions, so that class and role divisions are becoming increasingly blurred. To regulate the operation and procurement of the Navy fleet, each country has a sea power projection that is tailored to its own needs and interests. However, in general, there are 3 types of sea power projection that are known by many maritime countries: Green Water Navy, Brown Water Navy, and Blue Water Navy. This division was first popularized by the United States Navy, which clearly has mastered these 3 types of forces. The Brown Water Navy is a navy with the power to protect and defend the waters around the coast, known as the littoral zone. This region extends from the coast to the offshore sea for hundreds of miles. This area is the deepest part of a country's maritime territory, and it is here that the hustle and bustle of offshore traffic and ships from law enforcement agencies such as water police, customs, and others is concentrated. The brown water navy's strength generally consists of patrol boats with defensive weapons such as cannons for basic tasks such as coastal operations and the protection of economic activities in the waters. Later in the development, these patrol boats were equipped with offensive anti-ship surface missiles or torpedoes and were supported by combatants supported by missiles and torpedoes for such a function. Missile or torpedo-fast patrol boats are perfectly adequate for such functions. One level higher than the brown water navy is the green water navy, where the navy must be able to project power into the waters between the outer limits of the brown water and the outer limits of the shallow seas, archipelagic areas, and outer islands of a country. Dimensional range can reach thousands of miles. Its strength is in the form of fast missiles and torpedo boats that can reach a distance of 2,000 miles. Apart from that, it also requires ships of the type of corvette and frigate or larger than that, including submarines, because this power must be able to be projected to the outermost waters and regional waters. Blue water navy, where the projection of its power has reached the oceans and intercontinental waters. To describe its strength, you can refer to the United States Navy. With such strength, they can project their warship presence to all corners of the world with an aircraft carrier task force consisting of aircraft carriers as the core, cruisers, submarines, and support vessels. There are various types of ships that have different functions. Ships are one of the most effective and efficient modes of transportation. This is because ships have greater capacity and carrying capacity than land and air transportation modes. Broadly speaking, a ship is a large vehicle that transports passengers and goods by sea and river. Even though ships and boats both drive on water, they have differences. A ship is a large vehicle that carries passengers and goods on rivers, seas, and so on. Meanwhile, boats are smaller in size than ships, so their functions have several differences. The first type of ship is the passenger ship. Passenger ships have the function of transporting a large number of passengers. There are several other types of passenger ships, including cruise ships, ocean liners, and ferries. A cruise ship is a type of passenger ship used for cruises. The purpose of passengers boarding a cruise ship is to enjoy the time they want to spend on the ship. Cruise ships have a variety of accommodation facilities and equipment, like a 5-star hotel. Cruise ship itineraries always return to the port of departure. So, cruise ships always start and end their journey at the same place. The next type of ship is the ocean ship. This passenger ship is synonymous with cruise ships. This type of ship has facilities similar to cruise ships, such as lodging and equipment. However, the itinerary used on an ocean liner is different from that used on a cruise ship. Ocean ships depart from one port to another. The Titanic is a type of ocean liner. Ferries are ships used for sea and river crossing transportation that carry passengers and their vehicles. Usually, the vehicles transported vary, starting from private cars, buses, trucks, and semi-trailers. Clearly, ferries are only used for sea and river crossings. Freight ships are all types of ships that carry goods and cargo from one port to another. Thousands of ships of this type ply the seas and oceans of the world every year, loading international trade goods. Cargo ships are generally specially designed for the duties, equipped with other mechanisms for loading and unloading, and made in several sizes. The earliest records of maritime transport activities mention the transportation of goods for trade. Historical and archaeological evidence proves that this activity was already widespread as early as the 1st century BC. The desire to operate trade routes over longer distances and in more seasons motivated improvements in ship design during the Middle Ages. Before the mid-19th century, cases of piracy resulted in ships having to be armed. Piracy was still common in the seas around Asia, especially in the Malacca Strait. In 2004, the governments of the countries bordering this strait, namely Singapore, Indonesia, and Malaysia, agreed to provide more protection to ships crossing the strait. Cargo ships are the most common type of ship because there are not only a large number of them but also various types of ships. Starting from container ships, tankers, bulk carriers, car carriers, and so on. Container ships are a special type of vessel used to transport standard-sized containers. This type of ship has a hatch for storing standard-sized containers. Usually, containers are lifted onto the ship through the container terminal port by using a special crane. This type of ship is very familiar to you because the population is very large. A bulk cargo ship is a type of cargo ship whose function is to transport bulk goods such as coal, cement, grain, metal ores, and so on. This type of ship has separate cargo holds, or cavities. A heavy cargo ship is a type of ship designed to transport goods with a super large size that exceeds the size of the ship. This type of ship can be used to transport other ships. The goods carried can be in the form of oil refinery equipment or other large ships. The cargo area on this ship is not limited by fences, allowing goods to be transported from any direction. To transport other large ships, such as cruise ships, parts of the carrier's hull can be sunk. Then the cruise ship shifted over the submerged area. A barge is a type of ship that transports goods. Actually, a barge cannot be called a ship because it does not have its own engine. This vessel must be towed by a tugboat. Tankers have the function of transporting liquid oil. There are two types of oil transport tankers: finished oil tankers and crude oil tankers. This type of crude oil carrier usually has a smaller size. This type of ship is made of sturdy construction, and the oil it carries must not spill into the sea. Apart from transporting oil from the mainland, tankers also transport a lot of oil from the sea. Lots of oil refineries are being built in the oceans, including in several Java seas. Indonesia also has many oil refineries that use tankers to bring oil to land for reprocessing. In addition to bringing it from oil refineries, there are also many chemical liquids that need to be sent to various places by sea. Shipments also use this means of transportation in the form of tankers. Tankers are equipped with a complete safety system according to applicable standards. This is done because the ship's cargo is very dangerous for the environment and humans. The operation of tankers also cannot be done by just anyone. Prior skills and training are required to carry loads safely. If you're not careful, leaks and even fire can occur. Exploitation of oil has been started since 1850 by James Young's paraffin factory. Oil began to be sent by ship from the territory of Burma to the British colonies. Oil shipments are still made by land and then across rivers using wooden ships. It wasn't until 1877-1885 that the modern tanker was created. Ludwig and Robert Nobel are the founders of Branoble, the world's largest oil company, in Baku, Azerbaijan. Ludwig was the developer of the tanker, which is still in use today. Attempts to bring oil in large quantities were carried out. The first tanker to successfully operate the ship is 56 meters long, 8.2 meters wide, and 2.7 meters deep. At that time, Zoroaster used to sail from Sweden to the Caspian via the Baltic Sea. Since the trial of this first tanker, developments have continued. Is the Zoroastrian capable of carrying 242 metric tons of gas oil in two connected steel pipes? There is one tank at the front of the engine room and one at the rear.
That's all for the video discussing the ship this time. Hopefully, this video can add to my personal insight and that of all my friends about ships. Please comment, like, share, and subscribe to this video and channel. Hopefully, sharing can be an additional reward and source of knowledge for other friends. Thank you.